Hello and welcome back to part 2 of the top 10 PlayStation 1 games from me. My name is Voorhees Retro 81, as always. My name is not Sally Jim or anything along those lines. Offbeat opening and all done. I'm going to be a bit more go about these ones, as I proper waffled on the last one, and I'll probably proper waffle again, but at least if I proper waffle, I'll proper waffle a bit less, I hope, here. Speaking of proper waffle, when I was properly waffling, I made a few gaffes that I noticed when I recorded the video, but they were small and I didn't want to do them again, because the rest of the video is fine. I gaffed when I said Dead or Alive was number 4. It is number 9. Not number 4. And also, I did not get Resident Evil 2 with my PlayStation as one of my first 2 games I ever had. I got Resident Evil 1. I borrowed Resident Evil 2 off a mate, and then bought my own copy because it was so dang good. But we'll talk about that a bit later, because that's going to come up in this video. So we've managed to only have a 1-minute intro, which is a first for any of my videos, I think. So number 5 is a game that I think will probably be the last of the games that are likely to possibly only show up on mine or a few other people's responses for this, and that is steady on now. That is I like the fact that I activated that one while I was standing on that one, because I'm a thief and I've got ultimate sneak and I don't have to worry about traps. So number 5 is Nightmare Creatures. I debated whether I was going to do Nightmare Creatures 1 or Nightmare Creatures 2, but there's a lot of things that are wrong with Nightmare Creatures 2, despite the fact that it's an awesome game, that made me go Nightmare Creatures 1, because the original Nightmare Creatures is a much more consistent game than Nightmare Creatures 2. And yeah, this is one of my favourite PlayStation 1 games, and one of those ones that when you feel like you discover a game that you didn't really know about, rather than everybody in the magazines and all your mates are telling you, oh, you've got to play this game, mate, you've got to play this game is so cool. That's kind of how Nightmare Creatures feels for me. It's like one of my games that I found. It's a fantastic horror hack and slash platformery kind of thing. A little bit rough around the edges. I haven't played it in a long time, but I would imagine that graphically it hasn't aged particularly well, because it was a bit sort of rough graphically, even for the time. But it's really good sort of world building, really inventive, really creepy monsters. There's a hell of a lot of really freaky looking things running around. Yeah, they got really creative with the game, and it had some really cool settings. There's a level where you're fighting through I think it's Westminster, and it's on fire, and there are these sort of Jack the Ripper type zombie guys with top hats and trench coats and carrying meat cleavers, jumping through windows after you. It's such a fantastic game, and I really feel like it ought to get more love. And it kind of, I don't know whether it didn't, because it didn't really gel with the kind of this sort of I don't know how to put it, but it's not the kind of game that a casual gamer, somebody who's just into bought their console to play FIFA, and FIFA and Colin McRae racing and whatever, which there's nothing wrong with. I ain't saying there's anything wrong with that, but if you're into those kind of realistic kind of sim type, sportsy type games, and that's all you were really playing, which I think the PlayStation 1 was where gaming started to sort of split off into your hardcore gamer and your bought the system to play with their kids, and had a few like, you know, a few sort of real worldy kind of 3D games on there, you know. I mean, I suppose like Call of Duty I'd put in that as well, you know. I mean, these are all games that I like as well, by the way, you know. I like I played a bit of FIFA, but I'm not like, you know, huge on FIFA, but I think it's a good game. Nothing wrong with it. Used to play it a lot on the N64 with my brother. God, I waffle so much. I'm the king of waffle. I'm the waffle king. I should open a chain. But yeah, so Nightmare Creatures 1. Nightmare Creatures 2 is great as well. Definitely worth checking out, but just an honourable mention for that one. Very atmospheric, but quite difficult to control. Quite difficult overall. So difficult, I think a lot of people would just give up on it because it'd just be too much of a pain in the neck for them. And so number 4 is Ridge Racer Type 4, and I've waffled on about Ridge Racer Type 4 at length before. Best racing game of all time. You can quote me on that. I will probably, you know, I don't know why you'd be asking me what my favourite what the best racing game of all time is on my deathbed, but the same way that if you asked me about 2D beat 'em up brawler games, I would say Streets of Rage 2 on my deathbed is the best sort of Double Dragon clone type game. I would also say that Ridge Racer Type 4 is the best racing game of all time. I have never played anything since. I had never played anything before that was this good, that was this well presented, that was this fun to play, and that drew me in this much. Brilliant game. One of my favourite games of all time on any system. Just get it. Get out there, get it, play it, love it. That is my sterling endorsement. Number 3 is Dino Crisis. I debated about putting this where I've put the other survival horror game on my list, but I didn't because this game, Dino Crisis, takes a hell of a lot more of working out and is not as immediate and is not as... it's also a little bit too long, I would say, in comparison to the other game. Mystery times. But Dino Crisis, I think, is really underrated. It's so clever, the way that you can get round so much of the combat and by using your surroundings and, you know, picking which doors you lock, you know, manipulating where the security systems are, all that kind of stuff. It's such a sort of it's a game that rewards you for thinking about what you're doing, and it does it in a way that's so much more tangible than just, oh, you thought about what you were doing, so you didn't load an entire clip of shotgun ammunition into a wall because you were panicking. It's not that kind of game. It's like, well done, you actually don't have to deal with all those 6 dinosaurs in there, and you just got the key, and nobody got hurt, everybody's alright, and you haven't used any of your health. It's also probably, I would say, for the time, I think it's the scariest game in terms of like legitimate scares. I'm not talking about like the creepiest or the weirdest or whatever. It's one of the scariest games, probably the scariest game on the PlayStation 1. By the time I played Dino Crisis, I'd played through the whole Resident Evil trilogy and beat all of it. I never had Silent Hill. I didn't get on with the Silent Hill game on PlayStation 1. It wasn't until Silent Hill 2 on the PlayStation 2 that I really got into Silent Hill 2. But Dino Crisis, it didn't in that kind of like creepy way where you're like always worried about what's around the next corner scare me. But in terms of legitimate, like, oh my god, I nearly pooed myself scares, you know, fresh underwear scares, Dino Crisis has all the other survival horrors on the PlayStation beat easy. Just like how that game managed to make an enormous dinosaur 3 times the size of a building coming through a window a jump scare, I will never know. And you know, that's the sign of a good horror to me, is when you can make something massive that you should have seen coming miles away a massive scare that, like, you know, makes everybody basically wear their kecks. Fantastic game all around. Number two, Street Fighter Alpha 3. There's not a lot that can be said about the Street Fighter games that hasn't been said before. Obviously, up until the game that I shall not speak its name, the most recent Street Fighter, Street Fighter has pretty much been on the top of the pile as far as gameplay response, you know, just general fun, design work, etc, etc. I don't like Street Fighter 3 as much as everybody else does, but I still like it, and it still compelled me to play all the way through the game, even though the ridiculous final boss nightmare that is... Ooh, what's going on here? Yo! Is it dead? Yeah, it's dead. It flew into the sky. That is Jill. And thankfully Street Fighter Alpha 3, though, doesn't have any of those kind of shenanigans. Bison's a bit hard at the end, but he's manageable hard. He's not, like, obscenely, like, are you taking the mick, mate, hard. And again, a game that's got really great multiplayer that we just multiplay to death whenever we have gaming nights on the old grey box. So yeah, Street Fighter Alpha 3. I know I haven't said a lot about that, but I just feel like people have said everything that needs to be said about pretty much every single Street Fighter game, and I don't have a lot to add other than it's really good, and that's the one that if I'm gonna play a Street Fighter, I generally play that one, or I play Super Street Fighter 2, the new challenges on the Mega Drive, which is that's like not that version because I had it on the PC, but that Super Street Fighter 2, the new challenges, is my original Street Fighter 2 experience, basically. So I've got just over 3 minutes to cover the number one in the greatest PlayStation 1 games of all time is Resident Evil 2. And I don't think that will surprise too many people. I'm pretty sure a lot of people have probably put that on their top number one. I would imagine if people are being really honest about, you know, thinking about all the things that make a game great, people have probably either put Resident Evil 2 or Metal Gear Solid on their top PlayStation 1 games lists, unless they're like really into platformers and such like, where they might have put one of the Crash Bandicoot games or the such like on there. Just like survival horror, genre defining, fantastic game all round, accessible where the first one wasn't, complicated, enjoyable narrative and a lot of replay value, where to a lesser extent they definitely had that, Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, but the whole branching system and the finishing the game and getting the B save for the other character system was just really ahead of its time on Resident Evil 2. The auto aim just made the game much more accessible and much less of a hassle to technically play. Really frightening at various points. There are a few bits of Resident Evil 2 that, even though I've beaten the game about 11 times now, I always clench when I'm about to do them, like the blooming liquor in the interrogation room. My God! Fantastic game. That is... Yeah, I know I didn't talk about Resident Evil too much. That's a bit weird, isn't it? That like it's number one and I didn't talk about it that much. But it's just such a good game, you know, and everybody knows it's a good game. And I feel like there's less to be said about it other than just get out there and play it. And if you haven't played it yet, what is wrong with you? And get out there and play it and enjoy it and probably end up one of these people like first time ever reacting to Resident Evil 2 on PlayStation 1 when the game's been out for like 26 years or whatever. Sorry, that stuff always tickles me, but it is what it is. No diss on that, you know. You know, those videos can be really funny. It just makes me laugh when I see people reacting to stuff that's really old, and I'm like, you ain't seen that before, man? You've been living on a rock. Anyway. Cut the waffle short. Thank you very much for listening, and that has been my top 10 PlayStation 1 games. Love the system, love anybody who loves it. Take care of yourselves, and speak to you all soon. Peace out.